I stared at the termination letter they slid across the mahogany conference table, my hands trembling not from fear but from barely contained rage. 3 years of 60-hour weeks, missed birthdays, canceled vacations, all for a bonus check that would arrive in exactly 4 hours. Effective immediately, the HR director announced with fake sympathy. But as their smug faces waited for my tears, I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a manila folder. "Before I go," I said quietly, "there's something you need to see." Their confidence cracked like thin ice. 6 weeks earlier, I thought my biggest problem was managing the quarterly audit for Sterling Manufacturing while juggling my regular compliance work at Thompson & Associates. I had been working late again, the office empty except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant rumble of Phoenix traffic 34 floors below. My coffee had gone cold hours ago, but I kept pushing through the Sterling files, determined to finish the expense reconciliation before the weekend. That Friday night changed everything. I needed the missing receipts from the April transactions, and I knew Gregory Thompson, our managing partner, kept backup copies of everything in his office filing system. The cleaning crew had already left, and security knew me well enough by now. I was always the last one out. Thompson's corner office felt different in the darkness, larger somehow, with the city lights casting long shadows across his expensive furniture. I found his filing cabinet easily enough, but in my exhaustion, I grabbed the wrong key from his desk drawer. Instead of opening the client files cabinet, I unlocked the one marked personal. The folder inside wasn't labeled like the others. It was thick, rubber-banded shut, and tucked behind his personal insurance documents. Curiosity got the better of me. When I opened it, my blood ran cold. Emails, dozens of them, printed out and organized by date. The correspondence was between Thompson and Robert Sterling, CFO of Sterling Manufacturing, discussing deliberate tax evasion schemes worth millions of dollars. They had been systematically shifting profits through fake subsidiary companies to avoid federal taxes, shell companies with addresses that led to empty lots, fictitious employee payrolls, manipulated inventory counts. My hands shook as I read email after email detailing how they had been defrauding the government for over 2 years. Robert Sterling wrote about creative accounting solutions, and Thompson responded with specific instructions on how to hide money trails from auditors. They discussed bribes to local tax assessors and kickbacks to procurement officers. But it got worse. Much worse. In the final section of the folder, I found my own performance reviews, all of them glowing. Thompson had written that I was exceptionally thorough, completely trustworthy, and showed outstanding attention to detail in compliance matters. This contradicted everything he had been telling me for the past month about my problematic work and concerning oversights. I photographed every single page with my phone, my heart pounding so loud I was sure someone would hear it. As I reached the bottom of the stack, I found the smoking gun that made my stomach drop through the floor. A printed email chain from just 2 weeks ago. Thompson, writing to Patricia Walsh, our HR director. We need to terminate Elsa before the December bonus disbursement. She's getting too close to the Sterling irregularities, and her $25,000 performance bonus is money we can't afford to lose right now. Frame it as a security risk claim. She's been sloppy with confidential information. Make sure the termination is for cause, so we avoid severance payments. Patricia's response was equally damning. Agreed. I'll start documenting performance issues immediately. We can use her access to the Sterling files as justification. The board won't question it if we say she compromised client confidentiality. I sat in Thompson's leather chair, staring at the evidence of their betrayal, feeling like the world had shifted beneath my feet. They weren't just stealing from the government, they were planning to destroy my career and steal my bonus to cover their tracks. That was when I realized I wasn't just a witness to their crime, I was their fall guy. The next month was the longest of my life. Every morning, I walked into that office knowing exactly what Thompson and Patricia were planning, watching them build their case against me with false smiles and manufactured concerns. Thompson started micromanaging everything I did, Projects I had handled successfully for years suddenly required his personal review. He questioned my methods, double-checked my calculations, and made notes in his little black book every time we spoke. When I completed the Sterling audit report, ironically, finding nothing wrong because I was looking in all the wrong places, he criticized my lack of thoroughness. "Elsa, I'm concerned about your attention to detail lately," he said during our weekly one-on-one meeting, his voice dripping with false concern. "The Sterling account is too important to leave any loose ends." I wanted to laugh at the hypocrisy, but instead, I nodded seriously and apologized for any oversights. I was building my own case, and every word he spoke was recorded on the app I had installed on my phone. Arizona is a one-party consent state, completely legal as long as one person in the conversation knows about the recording. Patricia was more subtle but equally calculating. She started sending me emails with impossible deadlines, then documenting my failure to communicate efficiently when I asked for extensions. She scheduled mandatory training sessions during my vacation days, then noted my lack of commitment to professional development when I couldn't attend. I began staying even later at the office, using my access to gather more evidence. I found backup files on the shared server that Thompson thought he had deleted. Financial records showing payments to the fake subsidiaries. Bank statements revealing money transfers to offshore accounts. I discovered that Thompson had been taking personal kickbacks from Sterling cash payments disguised as consulting fees for work that never existed. But the most devastating discovery came when I accessed the HR files. Thompson and Patricia had used this exact same strategy 3 times before. Sarah Martinez from Accounts Receivable fired 2 days before her $15,000 bonus in March. David Park from Operations terminated 1 week before his promotion and salary increase in July. Jennifer Adams from Marketing let go just before her commission payments were due in September. All fired for cause. All denied their promised compensation. All quietly intimidated into signing non-disclosure agreements with threats about their future employment prospects. I contacted an employment attorney, Rachel Barnes, who specialized in whistleblower protection cases. I met her at a small coffee shop in Scottsdale, far from anyone who might know me from the firm. "What you're describing sounds like a systematic pattern of retaliation and fraud," Rachel told me. Reviewing the photos on my phone, the tax evasion alone could result in federal charges, but the employee retaliation makes this a much bigger case. You need to be very careful about how you proceed. She explained the proper procedures for filing whistleblower complaints with the IRS and FBI. She helped me understand my rights under the Whistleblower Protection Act and the False Claims Act. Most importantly, she advised me to keep documenting everything while maintaining my normal routine. "Don't let them know you're aware of their plans," she warned. "If they realize you have this evidence, they might accelerate their timeline or destroy documents." The hardest part was acting normal around my coworkers. Janet Morrison, the firm's head attorney, often stopped by my office to chat about cases. She seemed genuinely nice, completely unaware of what Thompson and Patricia were planning. I wondered how much she knew about the Sterling fraud. But I couldn't risk revealing my hand too early. My breaking point came 3 weeks later. I was working late again, finishing the monthly compliance reports, when I heard Patricia on a phone call in the conference room. The door was slightly open, and her voice carried across the empty office space. "Tomorrow afternoon," she was saying. "Gregory wants it done before the bonus payments are processed. Make sure Janet is there. We need legal sign-off on the termination documentation. Tell her it's a security issue with confidential client information." My heart stopped. I pulled out my phone and started recording, moving closer to the conference room. "Has he prepared the false reports?" The voice on the other end asked. I recognized it immediately, Robert Sterling himself. "Everything's ready," Patricia confirmed. "Well, claim Elsa discovered the irregularities but failed to report them properly. Make it look like she was either incompetent or deliberately hiding problems. That gives us cover when the auditors start asking questions later." The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. They weren't just planning to fire me, they were planning to frame me as the source of the compliance failures. They would submit false reports to the IRS claiming I knew about the tax irregularities but failed to report them. I would become their scapegoat, taking the blame for their crimes while they walked away clean. That night, I called Rachel and told her everything. She instructed me to file the whistleblower complaints immediately, before the termination meeting. That way, any retaliation would be clearly documented as witness intimidation. I spent the entire night preparing. I organized every piece of evidence, wrote detailed timelines, and submitted my complaints to both the IRS and FBI through their secure online portals. I received confirmation numbers and legal protections that would go into effect immediately. As I watched the sunrise through my apartment window, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks: control. They thought they held all the cards. But tomorrow's meeting was going to be very different than they expected. Tuesday morning arrived crisp and clear, the Arizona winter sun streaming through the office windows as I walked into what I knew would be my last day at Thompson & Associates. I had slept surprisingly well, armed with the knowledge that my evidence was already in federal hands and my legal protections were ironclad. Patricia called me at 9:30. "Elsa, we need you in conference room A, at 10:15. It's regarding your employment status?" Her voice was professionally neutral, but I could hear the satisfaction underneath. I gathered my things calmly, including the carefully prepared manila folder that would change everything. My coworkers barely looked up as I walked past their desks. They had no idea they were witnessing the beginning of something that would shake the firm to its foundation. Conference room A was Thompson's favorite intimidation. Space floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a massive oval table that made people feel small, and lighting designed to put visitors at a psychological disadvantage. When I entered, 3 people were already seated, their expressions ranging from confident to sympathetic to curious. Thompson sat at the head of the table, wearing his most expensive suit and the expression of a man who thought he was about to solve all his problems. Patricia flanked him to the right, her tablet open and ready, looking like she had just won the lottery. But the third person surprised me. Janet Morrison, the firm's head attorney, sat to Thompson's left, her brow slightly furrowed. She was in her 50s, with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. I had always respected Janet. She was known for her integrity and thoroughness. Her presence told me they were taking this termination very seriously, probably because of the sensitive nature of my access to client files. "Please, sit down, Elsa," Thompson said, gesturing to the chair directly across from him. The power positioning was deliberate. Me alone on one side, facing the 3 of them like I was on trial. Patricia opened her tablet and began reading from what was clearly a prepared script. "Elsa, we've called this meeting to discuss some concerning issues with your performance and conduct over the past several months." I pulled out a small notebook and started taking notes, which seemed to throw her off slightly. She glanced at Thompson, who nodded for her to continue. "We've documented several instances of unreliable handling of confidential information." Patricia continued, "Your recent work on the Sterling manufacturing account has shown a lack of the thoroughness and attention to detail we require for such sensitive client relationships." Thompson leaned forward, his voice taking on a tone of disappointed authority. "Elsa, you've been with us for 3 years, and we've invested significant time and resources in your development. But frankly, your recent performance has raised serious concerns about your ability to handle the responsibilities of your position." Janet remained silent, but I noticed she was taking her own notes and watching my reactions carefully. Patricia slid a document across the table. "This is your termination letter, effective immediately. Given the sensitive nature of your work and the concerns we've identified, this termination is for cause." I read the letter slowly, even though I had expected every word. It cited failure to maintain appropriate confidentiality standards, insufficient attention to detail in compliance matters, and inability to meet the professional standards required for client account management. All lies, And we all knew it. I understand, I said quietly, signing the letter without protest. Patricia looked almost disappointed that I wasn't crying or begging. Thompson's satisfaction was visible. Well, need your keycard, laptop, and any client files in your possession. Security will escort you to clean out your office. Of course, I replied, pulling my keycard from my wallet and placing it on the table next to my laptop bag. But before I go, there's something I think you should see. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out the manila folder, placing it gently on the table between us. I found some documents that belonged to the firm. I thought you'd want them back. Thompson's confident expression faltered slightly. What documents? Just some files I came across while working on the Sterling account, I said, my voice calm and steady. I think they might be important. Janet reached for the folder first, her legal instincts kicking in. Thompson started to object, but she was already opening it. As her eyes scanned the first page, the email chain discussing Sterling's tax evasion schemes, her face went completely blank. The silence in the room was deafening. Janet flipped through several more pages, her expression growing darker with each revelation. Thompson tried to lean over and see what she was reading, but she held the folder away from him. Gregory, Janet said slowly, her voice deadly quiet. What exactly am I looking at here? Thompson's face had gone pale. I am not sure what those documents are supposed to be. Janet pulled out her reading glasses and began reading aloud from one of the emails. Quote, Robert, the third quarter transfers to Phoenix Holdings LLC and Desert Sun Enterprises need to be processed before the federal filing deadline. Make sure the employee count reflects the phantom payrolls we discussed. End quote. This email is from your company address, Gregory, dated 8 months ago. Patricia had stopped breathing. Thompson looked like he was about to be sick, but Janet wasn't finished. She flipped to another page and continued reading. Quote, the IRS compliance audit is scheduled for January. We need to ensure all irregularities are attributed to employee oversight rather than systematic issues. Elsa Martinez has been asking too many questions about the subsidiary structures. End quote. The room erupted. Thompson lunged toward the folder, but Janet pulled it away. Don't you dare touch these documents, Gregory. Do you have any idea what you've done? Janet, those documents are taken out of context, Thompson stammered. This is clearly some kind of misunderstanding, or fabrication by a disgruntled employee. Janet's legal training kicked into high gear. She looked at me with new eyes, suddenly realizing that this wasn't a routine termination meeting. It was a potential crime scene. Elsa, she said carefully, how did you come across these documents? I found them while looking for backup files for the Sterling audit, I replied truthfully. I was trying to be thorough in my work, which apparently was my mistake. Janet nodded slowly, her mind already racing through the legal implications. Patricia, I need you to step out of this room immediately and call David Chen. Tell him to get here right now. Emergency senior partner meeting. Tell him to bring outside counsel. Patricia looked like she was going to argue, but the steel in Janet's voice stopped her cold. She gathered her tablet and rushed from the room. Thompson tried one more desperate gambit. Janet, you have to understand. Elsa has been Gregory. Stop talking right now. Janet interrupted. Not another word. You need a criminal defense attorney. And you need one immediately. The power dynamic in the room had completely shifted. Thompson, who had entered the meeting confident and in control, now sat slumped in his chair, looking like a man watching his entire world collapse. And Janet, who had thought she was there for a routine employment matter, was staring at evidence of federal crimes that could destroy not just Thompson, but potentially the entire firm. As I watched their faces, I felt the first stirring of satisfaction. The trap had been set perfectly, and they had walked right into it. David Chen arrived 23 minutes later, followed by 2 attorneys from Phoenix's most prestigious criminal defense firm. The conference room had transformed from a termination meeting into a crisis management situation, and everyone could feel the electricity of impending disaster. David was the firm's senior partner, a man in his early 60s who had built Thompson and Associates from nothing into a respected accounting practice. His usually calm demeanor cracked the moment Janet handed him the folder. "Sweet Jesus," he whispered after reading just the first 2 pages. "Gregory, tell me this isn't real." The outside attorneys, Brian Walsh and Sandra Cooper, huddled with Janet in the corner, speaking in urgent whispers about criminal liability and federal investigations. Brian kept shaking his head and making notes on his legal pad. Thompson sat in his chair like a man in a trance, occasionally muttering about being set up and taken out of context. But the evidence was too overwhelming, too detailed, too damning to dismiss as a misunderstanding. "Elsa," David said, turning to me with something approaching desperation, "I need you to help me understand what we're dealing with here. How much more evidence exists?" I remained calm, my voice steady. "Quite a bit more, actually. Bank records, additional email chains, recorded conversations, documentation of the employee termination patterns. This folder represents maybe 20% of what I've discovered." The room went silent again. Sandra Cooper, the criminal defense attorney, looked like someone had just told her the building was on fire. "David," Sandra said quietly, "we need to discuss immediate damage control. If this evidence is accurate, we're looking at federal charges including conspiracy, tax evasion, wire fraud, and potentially RICO violations if the pattern includes multiple companies." That's when Patricia made the mistake that sealed her fate. She had returned from calling David, and now she tried to take control of the narrative. "This is obviously a vindictive employee, trying to destroy the firm because she's being terminated for legitimate performance issues," Patricia announced, her voice shrill with panic. "Elsa has been problematic for months, and now she's trying to frame Gregory with fabricated evidence." I reached into my briefcase again and pulled out a second folder, the one containing the evidence of their plan to frame me. "Actually, Patricia," I said calmly, "I think you might want to see this before you continue." Janet took the second folder, and as she read the emails detailing Thompson and Patricia's plan to blame me for the compliance failures, her face went from pale to furious. "Patricia," Janet said, her voice cutting like ice, "did you and Gregory plan to submit false reports to the IRS, claiming Elsa was responsible for compliance failures she didn't cause?" Patricia's silence was answer enough. Brian Walsh stepped forward. "That's witness intimidation and obstruction of justice. Federal felonies. David, your firm isn't just dealing with tax evasion anymore, you're looking at organized criminal activity." David Chen looked like he had aged 10 years in the past hour. "Gregory, Patricia, you're both suspended immediately, effective right now. Security will escort you from the building. Do not touch any files, do not access any computers, do not speak to any clients or employees." Thompson finally exploded. "You can't do this to me. I built this practice. Those Sterling contracts alone brought in $2 million last year. Which apparently was illegal money," David shouted back. "Do you understand what you've done? Do you have any idea how this affects every client, every employee, every case we've ever handled?" But I wasn't finished revealing the full scope of their corruption. "David," I said quietly, "there's something else you need to know. This isn't the first time they've done this." I pulled out my phone and showed him the photos of the HR files, documenting Sarah Martinez, David Park, and Jennifer Adams, 3 other employees fired before receiving bonuses or promotions. "They've been systematically stealing from employees for at least 2 years, I explained. Every time someone was due a large payment or got too close to sensitive information, they manufactured cause for termination. Janet was frantically taking notes, realizing the firm faced potential class action lawsuits from former employees on top of the federal criminal charges. Sandra Cooper looked at her partner and shook her head grimly. "David, you need to consider bankruptcy protection. The civil liability alone could exceed your insurance coverage by millions. That's when I played my final card, the one that would ensure justice was served regardless of what deals they tried to make. Actually, I said, standing up from my chair, there's something everyone in this room needs to understand. I filed formal whistleblower complaints with the IRS and FBI yesterday. This evidence is already in federal hands, and any attempt to retaliate against me or intimidate witnesses is now additional federal criminal activity. The room exploded into chaos. Thompson started screaming that I had destroyed everyone's livelihood. Patricia burst into tears, begging me to reconsider. The attorneys started talking urgently about immediate cooperation with federal authorities. But David Chen just stared at me with something approaching respect. "Elsa," he said quietly, "you did the right thing. I'm sorry this happened to you here. I had no idea." As security arrived to escort Thompson and Patricia from the building, I watched their faces. Thompson, who had entered the morning thinking he was eliminating a problem, was now facing federal prison. Patricia, who had thought she was helping implement a simple termination, was looking at felony charges for conspiracy and obstruction. The avalanche had begun, and there was no stopping it now. The emergency partners meeting was called for 3 o'clock that afternoon. Word had spread quickly through the office that something massive was happening. Employees whispered in clusters, clients were calling with questions, and an atmosphere of barely controlled panic filled every corner of Thompson and Associates. David Chen had asked me to wait in my office while the partners deliberated. I sat at my desk, surrounded by the boxes I would never need to pack, watching federal agents walk through the hallways with search warrants and evidence collection bags. The FBI had arrived within 2 hours of David's call to cooperate. Agent Susan Martinez and her team were methodical and professional, photographing everything, copying hard drives, and interviewing employees about their knowledge of the Sterling account irregularities. Around 4:15, while agents were still processing evidence, Thompson made his first desperate move. Despite being escorted from the building, he somehow managed to get past security and appeared at my office door, his face wild with desperation and rage. "Elsa, we need to talk," he said, closing my office door behind him. "Right now." I immediately reached for my phone to call security, but Thompson held up his hands. "Wait, please. Just give me 2 minutes to explain." Against my better judgment, I activated my recording app and waited. "This is all a huge misunderstanding," Thompson began, his voice taking on the tone he used with difficult clients. "The Sterling situation, yes, there were some aggressive tax strategies, but nothing illegal. Corporate attorneys approved everything. You're destroying innocent people's lives over paperwork you don't fully understand." "Gregory," I replied calmly, "I understand exactly what I found. Fictitious companies, phantom employees, falsified tax returns. That's not aggressive tax strategy, that's criminal fraud." Thompson moved closer to my desk, his desperation becoming more visible. "Look, I know you're upset about the termination. That was Patricia's idea, not mine. I can fix this. I can give you your bonus $25,000, right here, right now. Plus a promotion. Senior Compliance Director, 50% salary increase. You'll have your own department." I stared at him in disbelief. "Are you trying to bribe me to withdraw my federal complaint?" "I'm trying to offer you a mutually beneficial solution," Thompson said quickly. "Think about it, why destroy your entire career over a misunderstanding? You withdraw the complaints, we give you everything you wanted plus more. Everyone wins. And if I refuse?" Thompson's mask slipped completely. "Then you're going to find out how difficult it is to work in accounting in Phoenix when every major firm knows you're a vindictive employee who fabricates evidence against her employers." "Are you threatening me, Gregory?" "I'm explaining reality to you." Thompson shot back. "You think you're some kind of hero, but you're just a naive girl who doesn't understand how business really works. You'll never work in this city again. I'll make sure of it." Before I could respond, Patricia appeared in my doorway. She had been crying, her makeup smeared, and she looked like a woman on the verge of complete breakdown. "Elsa, please," Patricia begged. "You have to understand what you've done. There are 43 people who work here, 43 families who depend on these jobs. If the firm collapses, everyone loses everything. Their mortgages, their kids' college funds, their retirement savings." She sat down heavily in my visitor chair, her voice breaking. "I know we made mistakes. The termination plan was wrong, I see that now. But destroying the entire firm isn't justice. It's revenge." Thompson seized on her emotional approach. "Patricia's right. We can make this right between us. Double your bonus $50,000, plus the promotion, plus a guaranteed 5-year contract with annual raises. You'll be financially set for life. And all I have to do is withdraw my complaints and keep quiet about the fraud." "You keep quiet about what you think is fraud," Thompson corrected. "Let the attorneys sort out the technical issues. You get what you deserve, the firm survives, everyone keeps their jobs." I looked at both of them, seeing the desperation and fear in their eyes. Part of me almost felt sorry for them almost. "Gregory, Patricia, there's something you both need to understand," I said quietly. "I didn't file those complaints to get money or revenge. I filed them because what you did was wrong. You stole millions of dollars from taxpayers, you destroyed other employees' careers, and you tried to make me your scapegoat." Patricia started crying harder. "We never meant for it to go this far. The Sterling situation just got complicated, and we thought—" "You thought you could frame me for your crimes," I interrupted. "You planned to tell federal investigators that I knew about the fraud, but failed to report it. Do you understand what that would have done to my life?" Thompson's desperation turned to rage. "Your life? What about our lives? What about my wife, my kids? I've worked 30 years to build this practice, and you're destroying it over some technical tax issues." "Tax evasion isn't a technical issue, Gregory. It's a federal crime." That's when David Chen appeared in my doorway, followed by Agent Martinez and 2 other FBI agents. "Gregory, Patricia, step away from Miss Martinez immediately," David ordered. "You're violating the terms of your suspension by being in this building." Agent Martinez stepped forward, her hand resting on her handcuffs. "Mr. Thompson, Miss Walsh, any further contact with Miss Martinez could be charged as witness intimidation. I strongly advise you to leave this building immediately and contact your attorneys." Thompson turned back to me one last time, his voice filled with venom. "You have no idea what you've started, Elsa. This doesn't end here. You think you're protected by some federal law? But there are ways to destroy someone that have nothing to do with employment. You'll regret this decision for the rest of your life." Agent Martinez immediately stepped between us. "Mr. Thompson, that sounds very much like a threat against a federal witness. Please turn around and place your hands behind your back." "No, wait." Thompson backpedaled frantically. "That wasn't a threat. I was just explaining the business realities." But it was too late. Agent Martinez was already reading him his rights as she placed him in handcuffs. Patricia watched in horror as they led Thompson away, realizing that their desperate gambit had only made everything worse. "Patricia," Agent Martinez said, turning to the sobbing HR director, "I recommend you contact your attorney immediately. This conversation will be included in our witness intimidation report." As they led Thompson down the hallway in handcuffs, past the shocked faces of our coworkers, I realized that their desperation had just sealed their fate. Every word they had spoken in my office was recorded, and their attempts at bribery and intimidation had transformed them from white-collar criminals into desperate fugitives who would say anything to escape justice. The avalanche was accelerating, and there was no going back now. The arrest of Gregory Thompson on federal witness intimidation charges made the evening news. Local television stations picked up the story of the respected accounting firm now under federal investigation for tax fraud and employee retaliation. By morning, it would be front-page news in the Arizona Republic. Agent Martinez returned to the office the next morning with a full forensic accounting team. I watched from the conference room as they systematically dismantled Thompson's carefully constructed web of deception. Every computer, every file cabinet, every piece of paper that might contain evidence was photographed, cataloged, and secured. "Miss Martinez," Agent Martinez said, sitting across from me with a thick file folder, "your evidence has been extraordinarily helpful, but we need to understand the full scope of what we're dealing with. Can you walk us through everything you discovered?" I spent the next 4 hours providing detailed testimony, explaining every document, every email, every conversation I had recorded. The agents were particularly interested in the pattern of employee terminations and the systematic nature of the fraud. "The Sterling manufacturing connection led us to some interesting discoveries," Agent Martinez told me. "Robert Sterling has been running similar schemes with accounting firms in California and Nevada. What you uncovered appears to be part of a multi-state operation." That afternoon, I watched through the conference room windows as FBI agents arrested Robert Sterling in the parking lot outside our building. He had apparently come to meet with Thompson, unaware that Thompson was already in federal custody. Sterling's arrest was caught by news cameras, and I recognized several reporters I had seen on television. The investigation revealed the fraud was much larger than I had imagined. Thompson hadn't just been helping Sterling evade taxes, he had been running similar operations with 4 other major clients. Fake subsidiary companies, phantom employee payrolls, manipulated expense reports, and systematic tax avoidance schemes that had stolen over $12 million in federal revenue over 3 years. David Chen called an emergency meeting with all employees that evening. The office felt like a wake, with people speaking in hushed voices and looking around nervously. "I want everyone to understand what's happening," David announced to the gathered staff. "The federal investigation has revealed systematic criminal activity that was conducted without the knowledge or approval of the senior partners. Gregory Thompson and Patricia Walsh acted independently to defraud clients and the federal government." Questions came from every direction. Are we all going to lose our jobs? What happens to our retirement accounts? Are we being investigated too? David tried to reassure everyone, but the reality was stark. We're cooperating fully with federal authorities. The firm will likely face significant financial penalties and possible dissolution. I'm working with employment attorneys to protect everyone's benefits and severance payments, but I can't make promises about the firm's survival. That's when Janet Morrison stood up. "There's something else everyone needs to know," she said, her voice carrying across the silent room. "Elsa Martinez is the reason we discovered this fraud before it became even worse. She could have looked the other way, taken her termination quietly, and let this continue. Instead, she risked her career to expose the truth and protect all of us from becoming unwitting accomplices to federal crimes." The room turned to look at me, and I felt every emotion imaginable in their faces. Gratitude from some, fear from others, and confusion from many who were still trying to understand how their stable jobs had disappeared overnight. "What's going to happen to Thompson and Patricia?" someone asked. Janet consulted her notes. "Based on the charges filed today, Gregory faces up to 25 years in federal prison for conspiracy, tax evasion, wire fraud, money laundering, and witness intimidation. Patricia faces up to 15 years for conspiracy and obstruction of justice, though her cooperation with authorities may reduce that significantly." Over the following weeks, the investigation continued to expand. Thompson's arrest had been broadcast nationally, and other victims began coming forward. Former employees from our firm contacted the FBI with stories of suspicious terminations and denied bonuses. Employees from other accounting firms reported similar patterns with their Sterling manufacturing audits. The most shocking revelation came when federal agents searched Thompson's home and found evidence that the fraud extended beyond simple tax evasion. Thompson had been skimming money from client accounts, using the false subsidiary companies to hide embezzled funds. The total amount of his theft exceeded $18 million. Patricia, faced with overwhelming evidence and the prospect of decades in prison, agreed to cooperate fully with federal prosecutors. Her detailed confession revealed the complete scope of the operation, including bribes to tax officials and kickbacks to procurement officers at multiple companies. Robert Sterling, caught in an impossible position, also agreed to cooperate. His testimony revealed that Thompson had approached him with the tax evasion scheme, not the other way around. Thompson had been the mastermind, selling his services to multiple companies looking to avoid their tax obligations. The case attracted national attention when it was revealed that Thompson's scheme had connections to a larger network of corrupt accounting firms across 7 states. Federal prosecutors announced that it was one of the largest tax fraud investigations in Arizona history. 6 months after that morning termination meeting, I sat in a federal courthouse watching Gregory Thompson plead guilty to 14 felony charges. He looked broken. Nothing like the confident man who had tried to fire me and steal my bonus. His wife and children sat in the gallery, their faces etched with shame and disbelief. Patricia received a more lenient sentence, 2 years of probation and 5,000 hours of community service in exchange for her complete cooperation and testimony against Thompson. She had lost her career and her reputation, but she would avoid prison. Robert Sterling received 6 years in federal prison. His company was dissolved, and he was ordered to pay over $8 million in restitution to the federal government. Thompson's sentencing was the final act of the drama. Federal Judge Sarah Williams looked down at him with contempt as she delivered his fate. 8 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised probation and restitution payments totaling over $12 million. Mr. Thompson, Judge Williams said, you violated the public trust, stole from your fellow citizens, and attempted to destroy the career of the very person who exposed your crimes. Your actions represent everything that is wrong with white-collar criminal activity in this country. As they led Thompson away in shackles, I felt the final piece of justice click into place. The man who had tried to destroy my life for his own profit was now facing the consequences of his choices. But the most satisfying moment came when I received my official notification from the IRS. The letter from the Internal Revenue Service arrived on a Tuesday morning in March, exactly 8 months after that infamous termination meeting. I was sitting in my new office in Denver, Colorado, looking out at the snow-capped Rocky Mountains, when my assistant brought me the certified mail envelope. Inside was official confirmation of my whistleblower reward under the Internal Revenue Service whistleblower program. 15% of the total recovered taxes, penalties, and interest. The number at the bottom of the page took my breath away. $1,867,412.38. I sat back in my leather chair, a far cry from the cramped cubicle I had occupied at Thompson & Associates, and reflected on the incredible journey that had brought me here. The previous fall, while the federal investigation was still unfolding, I had been contacted by Morrison, Klein & Associates, one of Denver's most prestigious accounting firms. We've been following your case closely, Sarah Morrison had told me during our initial phone call. What you did requires exceptional integrity and courage. Those are exactly the qualities we look for in senior management. They offered me the position of Director of Compliance and Ethics at triple my previous salary, with a 5-year contract and immediate vesting in their profit-sharing program. My job was to oversee compliance for their Fortune 500 clients and to establish best practices for identifying and reporting financial irregularities. More importantly, they wanted me to train other accounting professionals about the moral courage required to do the right thing when powerful people pressure you to stay silent. The past 8 months had been transformative. I found myself speaking at professional conferences about whistleblower protections and ethical accounting practices. The Institute of Management Accountants invited me to join their ethics committee. The Federal Bureau of Investigation asked me to help design training programs for identifying financial fraud. But the most meaningful change was personal. I had discovered something about myself that I never knew existed. The strength to stand up against corruption, even when it meant risking everything I had worked for. David Chen had kept his word about protecting the employees of Thompson & Associates. He negotiated settlements with former clients, used insurance proceeds to cover severance payments, and helped every employee find new positions at other firms. The accounting practice was dissolved, but everyone landed safely. Janet Morrison, no relation to my new boss, had been particularly supportive during the transition. "You saved us all from becoming unwitting accomplices to federal crimes," she told me during our final conversation. If this had continued much longer, every attorney and accountant in the firm could have faced criminal charges. On my desk in Denver sat a framed photograph from a ceremony 6 months earlier. The Arizona chapter of the Institute of Management Accountants had presented me with their annual Ethics Award, recognizing my exceptional courage in exposing financial fraud and protecting the public interest. In the photo, I was shaking hands with the chapter president while holding a crystal plaque. But the most satisfying recognition had come from an unexpected source. Sarah Martinez, David Park, and Jennifer Adams, the 3 employees who had been terminated before me, had formed a group to support other victims of employment retaliation. They contacted me after reading about my case in the news. "We always knew something wasn't right about our terminations," Sarah told me during our reunion lunch in Phoenix, "but we were too scared and isolated to fight back. What you did gave us the courage to come forward and tell our stories." All 3 received settlements from the firm's insurance company and found excellent positions with other employers. More importantly, their testimony had been crucial in establishing the pattern of retaliation that helped convict Thompson and Patricia. The ripple effects of the case continued to spread. The Federal Bureau of Investigation used our case as a model for training agents to recognize systematic accounting fraud. The Internal Revenue Service updated their whistleblower guidelines to better protect employees in similar situations. Arizona passed new legislation, strengthening protections for employees who report financial crimes. I had used part of my whistleblower reward to establish the Ethical Accounting Scholarship Fund at Arizona State University. The fund provides financial assistance to accounting students who commit to taking advanced courses in professional ethics and fraud detection. Every year, I speak to the scholarship recipients about the importance of moral courage in their future careers. Today marked exactly 1 year since that morning when I had walked into conference room A, expecting to be terminated, and ended up exposing one of the largest tax fraud schemes in Arizona history. I was preparing for another speaking engagement, this time at the University of Colorado's Business School, when my phone rang. "Elsa, it's Rachel Barnes," said the familiar voice of the employment attorney who had guided me through the legal complexities of becoming a federal whistleblower. "I wanted to call you personally with some news. Thompson just lost his final appeal. His conviction is upheld, and hell served the full 8 years. I closed my eyes and felt a deep sense of closure. Justice had truly been served. That evening, I stood on my apartment balcony overlooking downtown Denver, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple. The city sparkled with lights, and I could see families in the park below enjoying the spring weather. I thought about all the people who had been affected by my decision to speak truth to power. The taxpayers who would receive refunds from the recovered money. The employees who were protected from future retaliation. The companies that would now think twice before engaging in fraud. The accounting students who would learn about ethical practices. The federal agents who now had better tools for investigating financial crimes. Most importantly, I thought about the person I had become. A year earlier, I had been someone who kept her head down, worked hard, and trusted that doing good work would be enough. I had learned that sometimes good people have to make difficult choices to protect others from those who abuse their power. My phone buzzed with a text message from my mother. "Saw your interview on the news tonight. So proud of the woman you've become. Dad would be proud too. My father had been an accountant, and he had always taught me that numbers don't lie, but people do. He died when I was in college, but I knew he would have supported my decision to expose the truth, no matter the personal cost. As I prepared for bed, I reflected on the life lesson that had emerged from this experience. Standing up for what's right isn't always easy, and it often requires personal sacrifice. But the alternative, staying silent while others are harmed, is a price too high to pay. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is find the courage to speak the truth, even when your voice shakes. The whistleblower reward had given me financial security, but the real reward was deeper. The knowledge that I had used my voice to protect others and to ensure that justice was served. I had learned that one person, armed with evidence and moral courage, could take down a criminal conspiracy and protect countless innocent people. I had started this journey as someone who was fired hours before her bonus. I ended it as someone who had found her true calling, standing up for what's right, no matter the cost. Have you ever faced a situation where you had to choose between keeping quiet and speaking up for what's right? The most difficult moments in our lives often reveal who we truly are. And sometimes the courage to do the right thing comes from the most unexpected places. I'd love to hear about your experiences with standing up for your principles in the comments below. If this story inspired you to think about the importance of integrity in your own life, please like this video and subscribe for more stories about finding the courage to do what's right. Share this with someone who might need to hear that one person really can make a difference when they decide to stand up against injustice. Thank you for listening, and remember, your voice matters more than you know, and sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply tell the truth.